Hello, this is episode 23 of the Martial Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Jacobs. I'm a martial artist, martial arts journalist, former contributing editor to Black Belt Magazine, and I tell stories about martial arts. Thanks for listening today. A couple of quick things before we get to our guest. As I mentioned on the last couple of podcasts, if you like the show and want to support it, the best way to do that is to consider purchasing a copy of my new book, The Principles of Unarmed Combat, second edition, which is available on Amazon, and there's a link included in the show notes. Also, we had a little bit of technical difficulty with the sound in this episode. I apologize for that, but it was still a great interview with Don Gulla, and I think it's well worth listening to. And now to the interview. Our guest today won a gold medal in judo at the Junior Olympics, won a gold medal in karate at the World Police and Fire Games, and besides spending his life training in a variety of other martial arts, worked for 30 years in law enforcement, more than 10 of those as a SWAT team officer. He's now one of the most respected figures in the field of training law enforcement officers in defensive tactics. I welcome Don Gulla to the show. Don, how are you?
Good. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming on. So, just to give people a little bit of your background, you grew up in kind of a rough neighborhood and got into boxing and wrestling early on as a kid to learn how to defend yourself a little, correct?
Yep. Started what I consider into the more realistic combatives at an early age.
Hmm.
Started boxing when I was 10, started wrestling in junior high through high school. And then, fortunately, in my high school, had the oldest high school judo program in the United States and had the honor of training under Sensei Doug Graham, who was a Black Belt Hall of Fame and also a math teacher at my school.
That's fortunate. So you were pretty successful at all these things. Yeah, besides being a junior Olympic judo champion, like I said, you were also a state champion wrestler, weren't you?
I was on the state high school team, won the third in my division. And I was lucky because in the 70s is in the heyday of the Bruce Lee era, right? And that's when all martial arts started coming out. And that's when I got the hook, especially doing judo and then moving on from there over the next 50 years.
Yeah, you just kept training and exploring other arts, karate, kickboxing, BJJ, Filipino arts, right?
Yes. So it's funny because I've gone through kind of all the eras of the martial arts. Probably it would be more, even from the judo in the 50s, back through karate, ninjutsu, Muay Thai, but kind of had a chance to dip into all of them along the way. So I have a good kind of history of martial arts, especially relating to tying it to police training.
What was it that kept your interest up all those years in continually seeking out new arts to learn and train in?
Well, I think the only reason I got through high school was sports. So I loved athletics and, from judo and wrestling. And, it was interesting because once I got out of high school, I thought kind of my sports career was over. But then I got into karate, kung fu, and when I say like the heyday, I had a chance to do like an exhibition fight with Bill Wallace back in the days, met
Hmm.
Bill, you know, Joe Lewis. So my instructor, Ed Lewis from Yama Nomad, was one of the first uh, instructors that started blending, karate, kung fu back in the day. That if you went to a tournament and you weren't wearing a traditional white gi, you didn't score any points.
Right.
So, moving on from there. But when I got into law enforcement, I think I was fortunate because they have what they call the regional police and fire games. And I started attending those from, 1984. And then in 85 through 2011, I've competed in probably over 10 World Police and Fire Games, winning five gold medals in karate and others in judo. So
Right.
I've tried to keep my foot in it as long as possible. But now as I'm getting older, it's a little bit tougher to do.
Right. You got involved with working in law enforcement, began working for a department out there in Washington, and you got onto their SWAT team eventually. Did your martial arts skills come in very handy in helping you out in that work?
Well, it's funny because all the stuff you do ahead of time kind of get your foot in the door to other things. So within, being on the SWAT team, and a defensive tactics instructor, firearms and then taser instructor, I kind of saw where when I first got hired, what the defensive tactics were, and then trying to move into a more realistic. So on a SWAT team with heavy gear, a heavy vest, a rifle, it's a lot of stuff you think you can do, you can't do. Although
Right.
all that stuff provides you, it's like putting on a football uniform. It's harder to hurt you unless
Yeah.
they're shooting and stabbing you.
You were already pretty skilled and knowledgeable when you joined the law enforcement community, and I know this is the 1980s, and I know the state of hand-to-hand combat training for law enforcement in that era wasn't the greatest in most places. What was your impression of what they were teaching you guys for defensive tactics at the time?
So a lot of the tactics come from Aikido based, right? So a lot of wristy twisties, and it's following a lot of the traditional styles of it. So the defensive tactics training program was a lot of counter joint techniques with some takedowns. And interesting, there was a guy named Junkie Chung in the area, and one of the techniques he had developed was hair holds, which is unusual, but that
What
was in our, we
what
used
what
those
type of,
for
I'm sorry, what type of hold?
hair holds.
Hair holds.
Yeah, so hair hold takedowns, hair hold controls, they were very, very effective, but it hurt like hell to practice because your hair follicles would almost like they're falling out. So when I was going through a basic academy, I'd still bring in my safety kicks and punches to do sparring. So there was this kind of big disconnect of the training, but where you see a lot of the techniques fail is once you go down the street and you grab onto someone and you try to control them with the counter joint stuff. It doesn't work.
Yeah, my current impression of law enforcement training is that it's improved a bit as more and more training officers have been exposed to things like the UFC and Brazilian Jiu-jitsu and
Mhm.
Muay Thai. Is that accurate? Has, at least from the perspective of the physical techniques being taught, law enforcement hand-to-hand training around the country improved for the most part?
Well, unfortunately, there's two spectrums right now that I'm seeing in this. One is the Krav Maga, right? And so in most cases, 97% of what you do, you would never use a Krav Maga technique. It's
Hmm.
just, it's for those rare occurrences. So
Right.
how much time you're spending to do that when likely the most efficient thing you need to be able to do is get a hold of someone and put handcuffs on them.
Hmm.
The other is the BJJ ground fighting stuff. And truly, the average arrest, most do not end up on the ground. So there's this conflict between what does the average officer need and how much time do they have. So, people always bring up either one or the other when we do training. And looking back at where, especially like BJJ. So I started BJJ in the mid 90s, and we've moved on 30 years beyond it, but the other ones are still kind of recirculating everything and trying to improve on it. But it's just like a high school wrestler. If you go through wrestling in high school or junior high, you have a good foundation for ground fighting, period.
Yeah.
You know, take someone down, you know how to defend against it, you know how to control them. The jujitsu stuff can improve certain things, but certain positions they teach are not advantageous for law enforcement. Like, why would you be on your back trying to put them in your guard?
Right. Now, you started working as a training officer for your department in what, the early 1990s? And
So with King County, I started probably in defensive tactics in probably 87 to get into the program, then became a firearms instructor. And because I've been doing a lot of stuff with the police games, they saw my skills. I was one of the first officers outside of Seattle Police Department to be invited to be an academy instructor at the state police academy. So
Mhm.
that got my foot in the door. And that's where everything really started to change because we're able to develop specific police training there at the academy over the next 7 years going forward to current.
And you were among the first people I know of in the field to really advocate for pressure testing techniques and exploring the area of grappling over a weapon. I think you were doing this even a little bit before Craig Douglas, who's now well known in the field for teaching those concepts and has a great program for that. But you were doing this very early on, right?
Yeah, in fact, he kind of jokes about it that when they talk about weapon retention, because we were doing it in the early 90s, where people were fighting over guns and everything. And so it's funny because I laugh when I see all the new people. Oh my gosh, it's weapon-based training. They're like, yawn. It's like, really? You're fighting over a gun? I mean, we took it far enough to where in the 2000s, you talk about like the UFC kind of influencing the police, training. Well, we actually went as far as creating a mixed martial arts for law enforcement to where you got into the ring and you actually fought with a judo gi, a gun belt. You had a folding knife, you had a sim munition pistol that you could shoot. So
Hmm.
it covered everything from grappling to takedowns to strikes to weapon retention to
How
shooting.
did they score that? If somebody got off a round with the pistol or, got the knife
So
out and scored that, did that
so three,
count as a
so
knockout?
3 rounds. The first round. So this is how we kind of try to get people's foot in the door. Like the first round would be like primarily grappling based, right? No strikes. Second round you could add strikes to it, and then the last round you would add weapons to it.
Hmm.
So that depending on what control tactics you're doing, and so you can score it either on takedowns, positions, control and hold. The next round, strikes, the type of strikes combined with takedowns,
Right,
controlled. The last round, are you getting stabbed or are you shooting? But you had to kind of follow the use of force policy too. You just couldn't go out there and shoot someone.
right.
It's like why are you shooting them? Until they brought it up to that level. The biggest thing was that, and we're talking like in the 2000 mid 2000s, is that no one wanted to do it. That was the problem. It was just too. I think we were too far ahead of our time. That people now you see people doing it on YouTube. So I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
we're doing this. But it's like because I actually presented at the Association of Law Enforcement Trainers ASLET conference as a presenter to try to get more people to do it. But it was just you could see them kind of looking at like, what? Why would you want to do all that? It's just so violent.
Well, now you see guys even doing it with the medieval weapons, the armored combat stuff. I was just watching something from France the other day where they were basically doing MMA in combat with maces and dull swords and rolling around on the ground trying to smash each other with these things.
Yes.
It's not really new. It's something that, has been around for probably thousands of years. It's just, I guess, people are rediscovering it now.
Yeah, and it's making a like uh, kind of the evolution that goes circular comes back,
Right.
and really the toughest thing with I think getting people to train is that the methodology they're using for training, and I kind of sent you some information on that ADAPT project that looked kind of took a hard look at how we train, what we do, and it,
Yeah.
it makes it difficult. So the average officer in the United States gets an average of 2 hours of hands-on training a year. That's research-based, average.
Yeah.
So what can you teach them in 2 hours they can use on the street from year to year? It, it doesn't really matter
Yeah.
because it will not affect them. It's like going to the gym for 2 hours once a year. Oh, I'm fit.
I think when it comes to this sort of thing in law enforcement, a lot of people have a very inaccurate view of the capabilities of the average law enforcement officer that probably comes from movies and TV shows where they think most cops are well trained in both hand-to-hand combat and shooting, and that they're kind of experts in both those things, when the truth is the training, like you said, that most of the people get in this area is pretty minimal. And the guys who do become very proficient, like you are, had to do it all on their own at their own expense, right?
It's like Yeah, I mean, people favor certain things. Some like to go to the gym, right? But they'll do it on their own time.
Hmm.
We are seeing more interest in people going and training on their own time, right? And that's it's coming up a little bit, but how do you? It kind of goes back to the personality of the person. You
Yeah.
know, if they're on the job and they think their taser is going to do everything for them, it's like, why do I need that? I got my gun and my taser,
Yeah, I've
and
heard that.
when it
Uh,
really happens, they're like, oh, it. So it goes back to what you need to do because even in the military, I mean, it's improved a lot. But we had rangers coming in to our dojo training, and I go look at them and go like, why are you coming here and training? He goes like, we only get the basics,
yeah,
right? And then they started doing some. Marcelo Alonso, who was my first jiu-jitsu instructor, actually started teaching the Fort Lewis Rangers there, and now it's integrated in almost all the military. But we're talking like 1996, 1997.
right.
So you talk about innovation. Well, it's there. It's just who's doing it and how often are they doing it.
How do you improve the situation? Because it does seem like a lot of officers aren't that motivated to go out and train on their own like you were. How does law enforcement go about improving this and somehow getting the officers better trained?
Well, it takes mentorship. It takes the analogy I use is that a lot of people say just go do it, but it's like going to the gym, you're going to lift weights. The first time you go there, it's very intimidating. It's not fun. People look at you, you don't know what you're doing. And getting past that ego part, it really takes someone to like mentor them, take them out, show them that they can succeed in small steps, and then work up from there. So there's a couple big corporations that I do training for on a monthly basis, and they're better at hands-on skill than the average officer because they're doing not only monthly training in smaller doses, but they do mock scenes every quarter. And Alessandra is one of the content experts that comes in and helps with the
Right.
de-escalation course. So they're getting it, and now they've been thrust into situations now because of like political protest, but they're better at it because they've been doing it monthly versus like the one and done 2 hours to 4 hours yearly, and they're
Yeah.
unarmed. So
I guess it takes both a financial commitment on the part of police departments and a commitment on the part of the individual officers to really improve the situation, right?
yes, and I would say one of the best examples I've seen so far is Bellevue Police Department in Washington State. They have the only Gracie Jiu Jitsu Academy within their department that allows them to come train in the mornings on their shift or after shift. And when you get that camaraderie, Officer Craig Honolulu is one of my instructors and one of the primary instructors for Gracie Survival Tactics. He's able to get people to come in. Larry Pereira is there doing training. And so they're showing them from the time they were recruit that it becomes kind of a natural progression. And they're even dragging in the old time guys to come
Yeah.
and do it. So that's where I see if you're going to do it, you have to use something like that.
And just the convenience of it that if you have it right there, people may be more willing to do it than if they have to,
Yes.
drive across town to a dojo.
Yeah. Getting your butt in the dojo is like number one. It's like, do I want to go home? It's that
Right.
divided pie of what you want to do. You want to go home and do this, you want to do that with your family.
Yeah.
So it's
Uh,
all priorities, and that's what makes it tough, to get them to do it all the time versus like, oh, it's required by my job.
Now, Greg Douglas has told me in the past, and so is Greg Thompson, who does a similar type of training for the Army Special Forces, that they believe most really serious hand-to-hand combat or extreme close quarter combat situations end up as a fight over a weapon. Either you're trying to draw your weapon while someone is attacking you at close quarters, or you're trying to stop the other person from drawing his weapon, or both of you are wrestling over a weapon that's already in someone's hand. Would you agree with that, that most really serious close quarter fights, even among civilians, tend to end up as a struggle over a weapon?
So we got to decide if they're one, if they're armed. So if it's not armed, it's going to be some type of fight.
Hmm.
But within law enforcement, you bring a gun to every fight because you have it on your hip. So in a serious confrontation, so I've done a bunch of classes for United States concealed carry. So, and I've seen on the civilian side when people come in, the biggest problem with civilian carry is that most of the time they never practice drawing from concealment. That's number one, because you can't do it when you go to a range. So it caught me off guard because we're training, we got like 50 to 100 people. We have to disarm them. And then when we start talking about it, I can see the people kind of go like, what do you mean drawing from concealment? Because at a range, you bring your gun in a box, put it up there, open it up, load it, and shoot. So there's this big uh, gap between what the most important part is like if you're going to draw from concealment or do retention, you have to learn that, and most never get a chance to do it.
Yeah, I would imagine that anybody who's thinking about committing violence, serious violence, is going to be carrying some type of weapon and looking to use it. It just makes more sense than I'll fight you barehanded. I want to kill you, but I'm not going to use a weapon. So I would think most of those really life and death kind of situations do involve a weapon. Has that been your impression over the years in law enforcement?
So the most scariest thing that we're seeing, and actually when I do presentations, I always include it, is the scariest thing to me right now, anywhere in the United States, is a 14 or 15-year-old with a fully automatic Glock.
No.
And guess what? That's the standard, right? That's what, if you're going to be cool, that's what you carry. So you carry a Glock with a Glock switch, which makes it fully automatic. And so, I mean, they arrested like three kids downtown Chinatown. I think it was a 13, 14, 15-year-old, all had fully automatic Glocks on them, right? So, see what I mean by it's scary? So you get in a confrontation and someone says something, it's like, oh, holy cow. So from the bad guy side, that's what we're seeing. That's scary. But for law enforcement or civilian retention, that ability to draw and use the weapon efficiently. And the biggest thing that people don't understand with the common semi automatic handgun, at close quarters, they're very, very easy to jam.
Yeah.
Very easy to jam. So that when we do our training for civilian security and stuff, they learn how to jam a gun. Because if I'm in a confrontation, the person draws a gun to shoot me and I don't have a weapon, I'm either going to try to not eat rounds running away, right? Or if I'm going to go after the weapon of control, I need to know how to stop the gun from shooting me, at least not a lot of times,
Yeah.
right? And how to jam it and then how to disarm it or hold the person down.
Right. Yeah. Any kind of grabbing with a slide or pressing up
Yep.
against it can put it out of battery. So that's certainly something to think about. But if why do we not see more people, both in law enforcement and the civilian martial arts world, spending more time training and how to grapple over a weapon like this if it is such an important aspect of real world combat? I think you've mentioned to me that you believe too many people silo themselves off in their own little niche of what they practice and don't have a holistic method of training all of this together.
And that's the biggest thing from the that research project is that people kind of categorize themselves as I'm a defensive tactics person or instructor. I'm a taser instructor, right? I'm a CIT instructor, crisis intervention. So, but when they can't put it together, so weapon retention, is it a firearms or is it defensive tactics? So they teach no weapon retention on the firearms range except the rock and lock where they try to pull it back. And it's unrealistic because there's no one trying to grab your gun. It's just shooting on paper. So when they get in a real confrontation, they go like, "Oh, that didn't work so well." Well, they see it in the movies and stuff all the time, but it's not realistic. So when we put people in, padded gear, give them a simunition gun and go, you see what happens, and it doesn't work to get the gun on. And even shooting someone two or three times from a torso position, especially like the low abdomen where there's targeting, will not reliably stop someone from either trying to get your gun. So one of the guys that's one of my instructors, he was shot 5 times disarming a guy, right, and still took the gun away and almost beat him to death with it. So that's the movie part of it where people go like, "Oh, I just shoot him," and go like, "Then what are you going to do?" Right? And they're still fighting you. It's that myth of what the handgun, especially like a handgun, right? And that's from the FBI study, will not reliably incapacitate someone in the time you need to do it. From the FBI shooting in Dade County, they shot the first round on one of the bad guys was non-survivable, yet he killed multiple FBI agents and wounded others after receiving the rounds.
Yeah, I think ball ammunition there, that was a big thing as I recall, and
Yeah.
changing the types of ammunition that are used now to the expanding hollow point rounds that people use nowadays, right?
Yes, yes. And
Uh,
the and yeah, so the technology people kind of depend on a better taser cartridge, a better handgun round. Well, it's just like if you, because I always find the hunters in my classes, and I go like, if you went out and shot a deer with your 9 millimeter 40-45 and you put 10 rounds in it, what would happen? And they said, I'd be lucky if I could find that deer. And the humans are built no differently.
yeah.
So for people to understand that, they go like, "What?" And I go like, "You're watching movies, right? Most people that are shot in a civilian encounter get to the hospital, especially bad guys, by driving themselves to the hospital."
That's why firearms training is vital. That probably doesn't get done enough by really any law-abiding person or law enforcement officer that carries a weapon. Most of them don't practice where they can be accurate with that firearm in a short amount of time. Has that been your experience as well?
Most people don't. I mean, some officers, again, the firearms people like to practice, but others will just do enough to get by,
Yeah.
to make the qualifications. So unless they do outside stuff, it's just like martial arts. They want to do be executor, they'll do it. And those become the firearms instructors, and they think everyone loves it. But in real life, uh, but some of the innovations that have helped people have been like the circuit training pistol, the laser-based pistol, that allow you to do a lot of the training at home. So using technology in a good way can help you. In fact, for a lot of scenarios, we use that because they don't break, they won't kill you. There's just a laser coming out, but you can see what's happening and run a lot of drills
Yeah.
without a lot of safety equipment.
It still comes down to that willingness to train and practice, though, because I
Yeah,
know I see a lot of officers, law enforcement officers at the local range I shoot at. They'll come in once in a blue moon, and usually somebody will say to them, "Do you have qualifications coming up?" And that's why they're there. Yeah, I have to requalify next week, so that's
yeah,
why I'm at the range. Other than that, they probably don't shoot all year, which is not the best way of maintaining your skills if you're going to need to actually use that weapon.
yeah. Having it available to, and it's like trying to get fit in the middle of a fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, what back to the grappling over a weapon, what to you are the key concepts in this kind of struggle for a weapon? Does it start with developing proficiency in wrestling or clinch work?
So first, being good at just basic grappling, and so we really push for positions. So, from basic judo, like side control position, where's your gun, right? Is it on your hip? Are you presenting it to the person? So, controlling the body and then the limbs, because if you're going to ultimately fight over a weapon, you have to control the body, or you're just going to flail around and try to point the weapon. And then, and ultimately for the close quarter weapon retention, if you have your semi-automatic pistol out, the the control points are the obviously the grip and the muzzle, And for most people, they don't control the muzzle, right? So as they're getting it, grabbed onto, how can they position in the place that they can control it and take an accurate shot? So depending on if the gun's, outstanding. So for law enforcement, if the person's getting close and they're going to likely try to get hold of your gun, that's where we use the G-wrap position that controls the muzzle, that can actually keep it from being taken away, but you can also control where you're going to shoot.
Right. Yeah. The way you do it, you call it a G-wrap. You have your hand gripping the gun normally, but your other hand, your non-dominant hand, is gripping towards the barrel of the gun. So you
Right.
have both hands on the gun and can get a firmer grip. And then you work elbows as you're holding the gun with both hands, right?
Yes. So kind of going back to like pressure testing and stuff. So we've known this for, you know, 20, 30 years. So I get a call from this guy named Henry Gracie, and he goes like, "Hey, Don, you don't know me, but someone showed us this weapon retention technique, and they had been looking for a close quarter weapon technique forever, and everything they've been taught by any other law enforcement instructor had never worked, or when they took it back and pressure tested it at their academy.
Hmm.
Tell this 5'5", 135-pound guy they can't take the gun away from him. Well, guess what he's using? The
Right.
G-Rack position from Craig Hananumi, who's one of my instructors.
Hmm.
So he goes, he's getting ready to do live fire on the range with his Glock. And before they videotape it, he's asking, "Can I introduce it? And we want to include it as part of our training." I go, "Knock yourself out." So that's now part of their curriculum.
I think most people who have examined this problem, in a general sense, just the problem of grappling over weapons like you have some similar ideas on it. If we're talking about facing someone with a weapon at close quarters, your best defense seems to be stopping them before they can fully draw the weapon, either controlling their arm when their hand is in their pocket, reaching for a weapon, or underhooking their arm to prevent them from reaching into their pocket to begin with. Once the weapon comes out and is in play, you're in a much more disadvantageous position, right?
Yeah, so even if it's out, I mean, we've taken this so in depth to where when we do it, and I have the gun, whether it's in my pocket or something, I'm trying to get it out or underneath me, they know enough to like grab it, point it towards me, and they'll pull the trigger, right, to jam the gun, but also shoot me.
Hmm.
So going into different layers of controlling it and then holding on to it. Uh, Really, it's about muzzle control, jamming the gun. If it's in a pocket, right, how are you going to get out of the pocket, right? How can you get someone? So a lot of the pain compliance techniques don't work. So I've seen a lot now that people are trying to do like pressures, and I'm going like, dude, that's not going to work.
Well,
You
which
know, like
techniques? I'm sorry, which techniques?
if you're using any type of pain compliance,
Oh,
just like,
okay.
yeah, to get them to release it, like on the wrist, pressure points and stuff, that's generally will not work, especially someone that's messed up, coked up, mental illness. So we use for stripping a weapon away, it's all small joints, fingers.
Yeah,
Those can be pretty good.
I've heard from people in special forces that have been involved in this and had grappled over weapons in the military combat
Mhm.
circumstances that they've discovered that trying to disarm the person is often the worst option because that's where you tend to lose your grip on them, lose control of
Yes.
them, which goes against most of, I think, the traditional weapon disarms that have been taught for years in martial arts.
Yeah, the small and the biggest thing is it equalizes a smaller versus larger person. That the finger manipulation we use is a little bit different than probably anything you've seen,
Hmm.
because it's not like prying them off, but really using the lateral portion and stuff. So I can bring the biggest guy up with the smallest person and go grab on, and they'll latch onto the thumb and can get them to release, whether it's a knife or a gun. But it's one that we've just kind of come up with over the years that seems to work.
Hmm.
And so going into that, like from firearms to like knives, like because I've done training with the JKD. and our niece over the years. And the biggest thing, what we see people when they go through those classes that are trying to come in and do like passing drills and everything. And I go, dude, the best thing for the knife defense is right there on your hip. So how do you train to get to that? Well, the person's stabbing you.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
So when we do training and we see people that have gone through like knife defense classes, right? They're trying to do all the passes and disarms and stuff
Right.
when really they should be thinking about a stop kick and drawing their gun and shooting. So
Yeah.
there's this disconnect of like, that's the best defense right there. So if you have to isolate the knife, fine, but you need to get to your gun because that's the quickest method to stop it.
Yeah, if you're the one trying to draw a weapon when someone is attacking you, you
Mm-hmm.
generally need to neutralize their attack and in some fashion control them before drawing your weapon, because if you do two things at once, defending against their
Yeah.
attack while simultaneously looking to draw your weapon, chances are neither of those will go very well, right?
Yes. And even we teach like back falls, use your legs to defend so you can draw, and easier to defend with your legs while you're shooting than to try to do it with your arms. And it's very effective. It's been used quite a few times that because it's surprising to the person that all of a sudden they're on the ground and they think they're winning, and all of a sudden their lead's coming up from the ground towards them.
Yeah, you like to use a front leg kick, I believe, like a teep in Muay
Yeah,
Thai. Yeah,
actually, it's a lot easier to kick. You can kick with either leg, but if you're trying to kick the rear leg, a lot of times it's too it takes too long, and depending on your stance, it's harder to implement,
right. And it can
especially like with
also
rifles and stuff, which a lot of people are now carrying.
It can also push you back, can it? End up sending you onto your back if you throw a hard rear leg front kick that you would really drive your hips into.
Yes. And so the one thing that we implement a lot that other instructors don't is that they kick pads, right? And pads are not the best way to practice because they don't get the timing, the distance, the person. So we bring a big bag of groin protectors, and that's how they practice,
Right.
right? So
And
they get used to, yeah,
and
stopping the person.
you would also want to be practicing against somebody that's charging into you, not just standing there, right?
Exactly. So we start off with just basically the technique or tactic, and then we move to them approaching slower than faster than quicker, so they can see the realistic, like I'm trying to do it, or I have my gun out and the rounds aren't stopping the person, so I need to include the stop kick as part of it, so I can get a better angle to move off.
Yeah. I remember you telling me about that lead using the lead leg instead of the rear leg front kick to stop people years ago. And I started using it when I was sparring in some Filipino martial arts doing the stick fighting. And it definitely does work as a stop technique, just freezes the person if you throw it into the shin or the knee, not
Yeah.
necessarily to cause damage, just boom, a wedge blocking them from coming forward, and it gives you the room to either do your strike or get offline and reset.
It's almost like a quick jab, like
Yes.
your support hand. Like if you're going to hit them with the stick, like just keeping them away and then going, and you don't have to change your stance. So, and
Yeah.
for like rifle SWAT stuff, that's one that we teach a lot. In that, you're driving down a hallway or someone's coming towards you, you're not sure if you can even shoot them. Well, there's your stop kick, right, to keep them at distance or to get them off your front of your barrel.
So you're still training different departments and organizations around the country in your methods, which you call wrestling, like arrest plus wrestling, right?
Yes. So
Eh,
yeah, and it's interesting that I'm doing even more with unarmed people, right? And it's interesting because there's so many private security now that needs self-defense training, right? Gun jamming, de-escalation, that it's crazy because they're the ones that really need it because they don't have much tools except a radio. So that's something that's starting to do some work with executive protection. So the we're trying to add technology So for the academy here, trying to add technology to learning, they have a lot of videos. So I shot all the videos for all their tactics, but getting people to practice, right? They come in and show it one and done. So I created a big poster that had all the tactics they teach, shows a picture of the tactic, and then there's a QR code that they can take their phone, scan the code, and it shows them the entire tactic all the way through with all the learning objectives and everything. So if they are going to practice, a couple days before the
Yeah,
test,
that's
at
neat.
least they can go up. Yeah. So they're doing the same thing for an executive protection large company that all the people can practice at afar, but using the same simple QR codes, right, to link to them.
So if people want to learn more about that, what's the best way for them to find you?
So the www.arrestling.com, ARRESTLING.com. My email's in there. And basically, yeah, if they have questions about anything we're doing, if they do a search on YouTube, I've got a bunch of videos on there
Yeah,
where I
you
go,
you have some very good material up there on YouTube. I would definitely
yeah.
suggest people interested in this topic take a look at those. Okay, I'll put a link to that down in the show notes, and I want to thank you very much for taking the time to come on and talk with me today, Don.
All right, Mark, thanks for your great work on what you're doing and keep up the good work. And hopefully, we'll talk to you later.
Thank you. That does it for this week's episode. Again, I want to thank Don Gulla for coming on. Thanks to Eleanor Academia for providing the music to the show. You can find links to their websites as well as a link to check out my book on Amazon in the show notes down below. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another episode. Until then, keep punching.